I have heard the suggestion that Bungie should make a Hive class or the ability to play as a Hive or an enemy race since the game launched. Hunters, I think this is the closest you're gonna get. The new Hunter gloves for Season 22 are Mothkeeper's wraps. These give you an extra grenade and turn your normal grenade into a moth grenade. This will spawn one arc moth, which goes on the offensive hunting for targets, and one void moth, which flies to you or allies to give them an overshield. The arc moth explodes for big damage and it also blinds targets. Sometimes the moths will spawn two of the same type depending on who is around. The season exotic is Diris, which is quite literally the Hive Knight boomer gun. It fires the exact same way the boomer gun does. You don't need to reload it, and its rate of fire will increase if you take or deal sustained damage. When you get a kill with it, it will spawn an arc moth. But here's the neat part. If you use this weapon with Mothkeeper's wraps equipped, it will spawn both an arc and void moth on kill instead of just the one. There are two subclasses I'm interested in for making this kind of build happen: Strand and Arc. We're going to talk about Strand first because it has a shiny new aspect. The new aspect is Whirling Maelstrom, which turns a thrown or destroyed tangle into a spinning death ball that hunts down targets and hits them with damage and unravel effects, and the ball lasts around 10-15 seconds or so. The ball tracks pretty well and moves at a moderate speed. I'm currently working on an individual video on Whirling Maelstrom and the build I run with it. If you're interested in that, that should be coming pretty soon. In terms of our second aspect, I think Widow's Silk is the safest and easiest play. It's just another grenade. It's nothing really that special. It's entry level. Threaded Spectre got a pretty significant update in Season 22. It can really tank a good amount of damage. So if you're a bit more in tune with the Hunter class ability than I am, you can totally rotate that in for Widow's Silk instead. Anyway, if we want to go with Whirling Maelstrom, we need ways of spawning tangles. We have the ability to tag things with our melee attack, which will then sever them, and then you kill them. That's one option. Whirling Maelstrom can also spawn another tangle if it gets a kill if you're not on cooldown. But as a backup, let's get some fragments into the mix. Warding, Transmutation, Fury, and Generation, nothing we haven't really seen before. You pick up an Orb of Power to get Woven Mail, then you kill something to proc Transmutation, which will spawn a tangle for us. Fury and Generation boost our ability gains, since we're gonna want a lot of grenade energy to spam moths, and melee energy to tag things with Sever in case we don't have any Orbs of Power nearby, or we can't pick one up for whatever reason. If you find yourself creating tangles without the need for those fragments, you can totally rotate them out if you want, but, Woven Mail is still pretty good. When it comes to stats, I'm sticking with pretty much the exact same setup as I usually go for on Hunter, which is high resilience and discipline, medium mobility, recovery, and strength, and low intellect. This is a pretty typical setup for PvE Hunters. This shouldn't be too new of a setup if you've been watching my videos. When it comes to the mod setup, we want to maximize Orb of Power spawn potential. Firepower will indeed spawn an orb if your moth grenade gets a kill. Feel free to throw on Arc Siphon as well. I don't think there's anything wrong with speccing into triple Arc Surge if you wanted to take some more drastic measures to your damage, but I've opted simply for more grenade energy on orb pickup. Powerful Attraction will help us scoop orbs as well when we are in need. Now, before I continue, I just want to say that this setup is not something I plan on running in any sort of hardcore or difficult content. And a big part of that is because of Diris. Its damage is simply not that potent on a per shot basis. Only when it's firing at its maximum rate of fire does it really get any level of competitive. In more casual content, that's fine, because it's doing enough damage to get the job done on the targets that you should be focused on. Fortunately, what it lacks for in damage, it makes up for in total ammo reserves, holding over 30 shots, which again, you do not need to reload at all. But it's not a weapon that really excels at single target damage against a big enemy. You want to use this weapon against weaker enemies because that's how you get all of the moths to spawn, and they do quite a lot of damage on their own. Now, once we downshift, we move to some easier content, seasonal content specifically. This build is a blast to play, pun not intended. Moths are flying everywhere. You're firing this weapon non-stop. You can stay really mobile, lots of things going off at once. My experience has been fantastic. I haven't really run into many special ammo problems in most of my playtime running this in the seasonal activity this season. I don't know if I'm just getting lucky or what, although getting the occasional card from my deck will help. But this build is literally just jump around like an idiot, spamming the Hive Knight boomer gun back at them while throwing a bunch of moths, yelling, "Let's see how you like it." When you're on the Strand version of this build, you really want to make sure you're able to spawn tangles as often as possible to get those whirling maelstrom balls going. Although, something I've noticed during testing is that your tangle cooldown when spawning tangles with your fragments, the way that we outlined in the build, that cooldown's still 15 seconds. It's not 12 seconds like it should be. That's a bit annoying because the Maelstrom is capable of spawning another Tangle if you're not on cooldown. So if you trigger your Tangle right away to turn it into a Maelstrom, it's going to end just before you come off cooldown from spawning another Tangle. Not the end of the world, but a fix to that would be pretty cool. I'm also supplementing my grenade energy with a weapon with Demolitionist in case I need to top up or I just want to recharge myself. If you happen to have the Immortal SMG or even Circular Logic with Demolitionist, you could rotate in Thread of Propagation to give them Unraveling rounds to further ensure that you are getting Tangles. Most of the time, though, my Tangle spawns were coming from tagging an enemy with my melee and then just killing that enemy. And if you can get your Maelstrom to hit something for a little while, you should have no problem getting your melee back. I found this method to be much more consistent, as sometimes with all the fun I was having, I wasn't really paying attention to picking up orbs. But also, sometimes I literally couldn't even see if I had Woven Mail active to even spawn a Tangle in the first place. The catalyst for Diris makes it so you can become amplified after a kill, but you don't need to be on an arc subclass in order to get amplified. Considering how much arc damage there is going to be in Season 22, Wizards, Knights, even Thrall melee is considered arc, this pairs quite nicely with Elemental Embrace from the artifact, although you will be able to live without this when a new season rolls around. But for this season, enjoy it. But now let's talk about the arc version of this setup, which shouldn't be really too surprising in how we execute it. Lethal Current, Flow State are the go-to aspects. They just have the greatest synergy, and I'm not really looking to break that up. The fragments we're going to run are Shock, Ions, Discharge, and Beacons. Shock makes your arc grenades jolt targets. Arc Moths that hit targets will jolt them, further increasing your AoE potential. Ions is going to spawn more Ionic Traces for us after killing jolted targets. That's going to give us more grenade energy. From there, I've gone with a greater focus on the weapon itself. Discharge. We're going to be doing a lot of arc weapon final blows with this thing, spawning Ionic Traces to give us more energy. And because it's a special weapon, beacons can trigger off of it, further increasing our crowd control potential. If you wanted to go into more of an ability energy setup with different fragments or wanted to push into lethal current and flow state gameplay a little bit more, you totally can, but if you're going to push that hard into it, you might as well just run that setup completely. Stats are the same, and your mods are pretty much the same as well. The benefit of using Arc over Strand is that you have something to fall back on in case you run out of ammo or you run out of steam. Lethal Current and Flow State are just so potent on their own that you can kind of weave some of that gameplay into the middle of shooting your grenade launcher. You can also trigger a heal with your melee in case you run into trouble, which is nice because you're not really going to have a whole lot of health stuff available to you outside of that and some Void Moths. We also have Jolt, which doesn't need to worry about cooldowns like Tangles do, and Jolt is still a very, very strong effect, adding in even more AoE into your kit. You're going to be proccing it all the time with your Moth Grenades, which are going to be fueled by Ionic Traces. Don't forget about Amplified either. This build is very mobile, and better movement always going to be a bonus. There's also the fact that you'll now have matching elements. Your subclass element matches your main gun, which means you get to take advantage of all those kinds of effects too, although unfortunately it appears that arc moths do not proc monochromatic maestro from this season's artifact. I know I haven't been talking about the seasonal artifact that much in these build videos, but in case it's not obvious, you should pick the mods that link with your subclass or the build that you're running. In this case, we definitely want Arc Orbs, Refreshing Pickups, maybe Elemental Munitions, and Monochromatic Maestro still works with your melee attack. As for which one of these to use, it's really whatever you're in the mood for. Both have their benefits, but considering where I think you're going to be using this, which is stuff in between 0 and 15 levels above you, you're going to have a blast with either version. Now, I know I said earlier that I didn't plan on using this in endgame content, but I still wanted to try it out anyway, and my hypothesis pretty much held true. When you can have those chaotic, tons of enemies moments where you're just one-shotting or two-shotting stuff and moths are flying everywhere, it's really solid. It's pretty fun. But when you're left with some bigger enemies, you just need to swap to a heavy weapon and contribute that way. The entire build is based on slaying smaller or easy to kill enemies, and also having a bunch of them around for moths to hit. When I was on the Strand version, I found myself just wanting to activate Whirling Maelstrom as much as possible, which kind of distracted me. But when I was on Arc, there wasn't as much pressure to try to do something more than what the core of the build was asking for. I don't doubt that people are going to make this build work in endgame, higher level content, but in terms of how effective I feel, I did not feel as effective versus running a different build that is more suited for that kind of content. That's all from me for the Hive loadout. Again, if you stick to stuff around your level, maybe a little bit higher, 0 to 15 levels, I think this setup is super, super fun to play. It's definitely very different than anything I've really played before. Let me know how you've been liking it. Thank you all very much for watching. I will see you next time.